Okay, good evening. Welcome to another evening of the Dine and Learn, Tafshin Vav. Thank you again, Moshe, for organizing, and Avshalom Meiri and family for sponsoring tonight's Dine and Learn. So we're getting towards the end of the summer. We're getting towards the end of the Perek Zion of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. And I'm hoping tonight to just finish the Perek, and then next week, which I think is the last of the season, just to finish up for the topic. So in the Halacha Vav, the Rambam talks about the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah. This is a theme that repeats in the Rambam's writings, and we talked about it the first night of the summer. And why does the Rambam emphasize so much that Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah is different than every other Nevuah? And let's read a few lines here. Kol advarim sharmarnu heim derech nevuah lachol hanevim. It's halacha vav. Everything that we said about the ways of nevuah for all the neviim, harishonim v'achronim, the earlier ones, the later ones, chutz mi Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabban shel kol hanevim, except for Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the master, the father of all the prophets. Uma hefresh yesh bein nevuas Moshe l'shar kol hanevim. And what's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah and everyone else's? So the Rambam goes on to list a whole bunch of differences. Moshe Rabbeinu, he had got Nevuah while he was fully awake, while everyone else was in a sleep, or they were in sleep at night or during the day. Moshe Rabbeinu was at like an actual conversation with Hashem, while everyone else got some sort of a vision, an allegory with the explanation with it, and other differences. So he said, why is the Rambam constantly emphasizing this? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was different, therefore no Navi can come and contradict him and change the Torah. The Torah's mitzvahs are forever. And the Rambam says this explicitly in Perek Tes, which you don't have in front of you. He talks about how the mitzvahs are forever, eternal. You cannot change a mitzvah. And then he adds the punchline. Halamadata she'ein Navi rashai l'chadesh dover ma'ata. So therefore you learn that a Navi is not allowed to add anything to the Torah. Lafichach. Therefore, im yamod ish, if a man should arise, bein min ha'umos, whether from another nation, bein mi Yisrael, from the Jews, which means either Muhammad or Yashka, that's what he means. V'yatze os o mofes, or he does some sort of a miracle. V'yomer Hashem shalacho, and he says Hashem sent him lahosif mitzvah, ligro mitzvah, to add a mitzvah, to remove a mitzvah. Lafarish be mitzvah, mid a mitzvah, peishalo shamanim Moshe, or to explain it differently. You don't have to wear tefillin, you just have to think about tefillin. You have to put it on the wall, or you have to, anything like that. Oh, sha'amar sha'os on a mitzvah shenistavu b'han Yisrael. He says the mitzvahs that were commanded, einan la'ola b'ladori daros, they're not forever. Ela mitzvah sofi zman hayu. No, that was just for the Jews when they were in the Midbar, or the Jews when they were in their own country, but not when they're in Galus, or after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, or after some man in Roman times arose and said he was Mashiach. No. Harez and Navi Sheker. It's a false Navi, and how do we know? Sharei bo laharchish nevuaso shel Moshe. He comes and he contradicts the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu is the Adon Kol Nevi'im. He's the master of all the Nevi'im. He's categorically different than any other Navi. So even if Yirmiyahu would get up and say, you don't have to follow mitzvahs, we don't care. Yirmiyahu's wrong, Moshe is right. That's the simple equation. Moshe Rabbeinu is right, and therefore the Torah lasts forever. The Ramban disagrees. He does not say the Torah doesn't last forever. He does agree with that. But in the parsha of Navi Sheker, so a Navi comes, someone who seems to be a Navi, and he says, do avodah zarah. So we don't listen to him. We punish him. So the Ramban says, and he follows the psukim that way. Why? Because we heard on Har Sinai that Sarah said Dibros, and one of them is don't do avodah zarah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you don't do avodah zarah, and then some guy comes, I don't care who he is, I don't care what his credentials are. If a guy tells you to do something when Hashem told you not to do it, who wins? Hashem. So the Ramban continues and says, not just avodah zarah, any of the mitzvos. You heard the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai. Therefore, that lasts forever, and anything anyone else tells you, forget about it. So according to the Rambam, why do the mitzvahs last forever? Because of Moshe Rabbeinu. According to the Ramban, why do they last forever? Because of Matan Torah. Okay, so let's talk. What's the nafkamina, and why do they disagree? I'll make it even more complicated, because why not? It's more fun that way. Perek Ches of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, which you don't have in front of you, or do you? You have some of it. Okay, no, you have all of it. Okay. So the Rambam says, oh wait, before we go there, let's go back to Halacha Zayin. How do we know who's a Navi? In Halacha Zayin, the Rambam tells us, on the same side of the page as Perek Ches. Hanavi, second line. As Efshar Shetia Nevuah La'atzmo, could be his Nevuah for himself. Go to the end of the line. Ve'efshar She'shulach La'am Mi'amei Haaretz La'an She'ir O Mamlacha. So it could be a Navi is sent to other people. L'chonei Nosam L'hodio Ma Yasu U'Lamona Mimasim Haram Shivadim, to give some sort of a Moser to them. So he's a Navi that goes out to people. So Ukshemeshalchin also, and when the Navi is sent out, Nosnin Lo Os Umofis. How do we know we should listen to him? Right? Every guy in the subway says he's a Navi. So how do we know we should listen to him? Because Hashem gives him an Os Umofis. He has to do some sort of a miracle. And to prove that he's a Navi. And not just, like a card trick. A real, something that convinces us. And exactly what that is, so that's a machlokes we're showing it for another time. So it's a geshmaka sugya about what is considered enough of a sign. But as you see, the Rambam does not believe that any of these signs are 100%. Because, look, some of these magicians are really impressive. It's hard to tell the difference between true and fake. Because these guys have their quick hands, and they got the smoke and mirrors, and they got their pretty assistant over there, and while you're looking there, they're doing something over here. It's hard to tell what's the good and what's not. Now, let's say they tell, instead of doing some sort of a trick or a miracle, they tell you what's going to happen in the future. You know what? Very often it's a 50-50 chance. So, I'm not saying anything about the good Hasidic Rebbes, but there are fake Hasidic Rebbes who will give you advice and tell you this is what's going to happen, and we hear the stories about the good stuff when it comes true. We don't hear this, but if he gives you advice and you lose all your money, no one's going to tell that story. That's not a good story. So there are people in Eretz Yisrael. There's one guy who's a bor am ha'aretz, he's a tractor driver, but apparently he discovered he has some charismatic ability, charm, and he convinced people that he's a Navi. This goes on. Rav Shlomo Aviner read a whole sefer against him because it's crazy. Hashem, we saw in the Rambam, Hashem doesn't give Nevuah to an am ha'aretz. This guy's an Am Haaretz, and he says Divrei Torah, and they're laughable. It's literally online. You can listen to some of his Divrei Torah. So the guy doesn't know anything. But he says he's a Navi, and the stuff he says, some of the stuff he says that will come true, do come true.
So the miracles that Yashka allegedly performed, you put miracles in quotes. He could not have done that?
Well, maybe he did. Maybe he's got, he knew some good magician tricks. Magicians are pretty impressive. Maybe he fooled people. Maybe it's all just fake. There's a lot of explanations possible.
Jews, we
or maybe
that they were real miracles. It's just that he happens to be a bad Navi.
Or maybe it's the Koach HaToma trying to fool people. There are a number of possible explanations. I don't know if it's even worth our while to go in that direction, because who said he did anything?
So is it the same thing applied to Bilam then?
Bilam, or could be he actually had some sort of a koach hatoma, and he was able to do some of the. Actually, the Rambam says at one point in his life, Bilam was a good guy, and that's why he got some of his nevuah. When he was a good guy, he did get nevuah. But when he turned to the dark side, so then he lost that ability of doing good.
But he still had the nevuah. He had koach hatoma going for him to do all these wondrous things, as it were.
So. Be that as it may, so a Navi has to come and give a proof, some sort of a proof. Okay, so he has to give some sort of a proof. Now, look at Perek Ches. This is unbelievable. So, Perek Ches Halacha Aleph, it starts out, Moshe Rabbeinu lo haminu bo Yisrael mipnei ha'osot she'asa. When Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim, he does signs to prove that Hashem has really sent him. The Rambam is saying that's not why anybody believed Moshe Rabbeinu. He split the sea. He brought 10 plagues. Those are pretty impressive signs. But the Rambam is saying that's not why we believe Moshe Rabbeinu was true. Shamamin al pi ha'osos. If you believe something just because they do miracles, yesh belibo dofi. It's never 100%. She'efsher shi'aseh ha'os balot v'kishuf. Could be he faked you out. Could be he brought a koach hatoma, or it could be he's quick with his hands. You don't know. Look, the Khartoumei Mitzrayim could do the stuff, some of the stuff, not all the stuff, some of the stuff that Moshe Rabbeinu could do. So maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was better at Kishuf than the Khartoumim, but he was still a Kishuf Machar, as they say. So that's not why we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. So why do we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu? So the 4 lines down in the middle, Uvameh he'eminu bo b'maimid har Sinai she'einenu ra'u velo zar. We saw it with our own eyes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu. Ve'oznenu shamu velo achar. We heard it with our own ears. Ha'esh ve'hakolos ve'lapidim, the fire, the thunder, the lightning. We saw it all. Ve'hunigash and so on. So let's take a step back. According to the Ramban, why does the Torah last forever? How do we know the Torah goes on forever? Because we heard it at Har Sinai. According to the Rambam, how do we know that the Torah can never change? Because we heard it from Moshe Rabbeinu. And how do we know Moshe Rabbeinu? Because we heard it at Har Sinai. So it seems like the Ramban just cut out the middleman. And he goes straight to Har Sinai, while the Rambam goes to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then how do we know about Moshe Rabbeinu? Because of Har Sinai.
Why do you say they're arguing?
Because they're clearly saying different things. The Ramban, so how do we know the Ramban is saying, Ramban doesn't even mention Moshe Rabbeinu in this context.
That's just the way it is.
He skipped a step. He meant the same thing. Okay, maybe. I like to suggest something more complicated because I don't like Mr. Akum. So let's, Akum's razor. So let's go more complicated. Okay. So let's just say possible. Let's take a step back. What's the Rambam saying? The Rambam saying is any proof that a Navi brings is B'Torah Safek. We don't know for sure. You can never know for sure. Except for one, that was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was Vadai. So when a Navi comes and says, don't follow the Torah, Ein Safek Motzei Midei Vadai, right? It's a general rule in Gemara. If you have a doubt, someone comes with a doubtful claim, someone comes with a true claim, the best it always rewards the true claim. The Ramban is not saying that. And the Ramban actually says this explicitly. So the Rambam that we quoted about Moshe Rabbeinu, we didn't believe him because of the proofs that he brought, because of Har Sinai. The Ramban quotes that in full to explain a Rashi that he disagrees with. The Ramban seems to disagree with this Rambam. And elsewhere, the Rambam says, I think it was in last week's Parsha, the Ramban says, anytime a Navi brings a proof, we believe it 100%. Not this Rambam sheet of, maybe yes, maybe no. The Ramban said a proof is good. We believe it Vadai. If Yirmiyahu Hanavi comes, the Rambam seems to be saying, which is a little strange, Yirmiyahu Hanavi, we don't believe him 100%, right? That's what he says. The only Navi we believe 100% is Moshe Rabbeinu. Everyone else, it's a process. It's like a bureaucratic process. The Bezdin needs a way to what?
He said the Navi comes with proof.
Well, it brings an os or a mofis. Some sort of a miracle. I'm sorry?
So you're talking about an os or a mofis.
Right.
We've already established that os and mofis is a problem. It could become from prayer or something.
That's the Rambam Shita. The Ramban seems to say, actually every other Rishon seems to say, an os or a mofis is a good proof. Because Hashem wants us to have Nevi'im, so He's going to give us some way to know for sure that someone's a Navi. Otherwise,
the Navi can't do anything anyway. It's not he's just okay. Now he's a Navi.
He tells you what to do. So, for example, should Bnei Yisrael make a peace treaty with Mitzrayim or not? Bavel's coming, or Usher's coming, I forget who, and they come and tell us, the Navi comes and says, don't make a peace treaty with Mitzrayim. Do we listen to him or not? So if he's true, if it's proven, so then we have to listen to him, and if we don't, well, we'll get punished. But if he's a Navi Sheker, and in those days they're allowed a Nevi'e Sheker, so we're supposed to do the opposite, or not listen to him. So we need to know who's a Navi. So according to the Ramban, Hashem is going to has a process, and we follow that process, and it will work. And there are some Rishonim who say, so let's say the oath is he tells the future. He says this is what's going to happen. Very specific, not some sort of Nostradamus, horoscope thing that is all vague. It's very specific. This is going to happen in the future, and it happens. So Hashem will make sure that will be a good proof. And there's no 50-50. There's no flip of a coin. If he's not a real Navi, Hashem will make sure it doesn't happen. That's how some Rishonim say. Because otherwise, how are we supposed to know who's a Navi? The Rambam is not saying that at all. The Rambam doesn't like that. The Rambam is saying we have a process. You go to the DMV, you hand in your paperwork, and if it all checks off, so then we trust that you're a Navi to the best of our ability. But it's just a process. The Ramban says, no, this is a good way to validate who's a Navi and who's not. So according to the Rambam, Moshe Rabbeinu is a different level than every other Navi.
Are you saying that the other Rishonim are saying that nobody besides for a Navi can give a mofis?
In the test area. Like if there's a Bezdin examining who is a Navi or not, so in that scenario, only a true Navi will be able to give
But these
some
are
sort of...
prerequisites. In other words, that he's a big Talmud Chacham, etc., or can he be a truck driver?
Well, Mr. Hashem, we'll talk about that in a few
What I'm
minutes.
asking is because there's a famous story in the Vilna Gaon book, assuming that you believe all these stories in the Vilna Gaon book. So somebody in Vilna was making very specific statements, including about the Vilna Gaon. You were doing this, you were talking to this mom, you were doing this last Thursday night. So he said that we're going to leave us alone. And afterwards he said to the Besson, kick him out of town. He said, what you're saying is true. But this type of power either comes from Koyach Tahira, and it only comes from Koyach Tahira if you give the guy the Chin and pass it. Give him pass it.
That was the past anyway, that wasn't the future.
So, yeah, but sometimes it could just be a miracle, right? You do something
His point
incredible.
is very much like the Rambam. In other words, there's a prerequisite to being able to. Life base can happen regardless. You can be a truck driver. But the prerequisite for being taken seriously is being a high level Talmud Chacham.
There's a tshuva the Rashba like that. The Rashba in Spain in, what was it, around the year 1200, something like that. So a Navi, another community says, we have a guy who's giving very great nevuahs. He's telling us the future and it's happening. What do we do? The Rashba is along tshuva and he says, bottom line is the Gemara says you can only get nevuah in Eretz Yisrael. He's in Spain. He's not a Navi. It doesn't matter if what he said comes true. It's a similar idea. Doesn't matter if what he said comes true. Doesn't matter if he's a Talmud Chacham, if he's saying great Divrei Torah, if he's telling us things that no one else would know. He's not in Eretz Yisrael. He's not a Navi. End of story.
Who said that?
The Rashba. It's a tshuva of the Rashba. Yeah, 2 minutes. Let's finish this. Then we'll get the food. There's a second half of the evening. So let's Okay. So according to the Ramban, all Nevi'im are true. Moshe Rabbeinu and the rest. According to the Rambam, only Moshe Rabbeinu is 100% true. The others we can't really know for sure. So according to the Ramban, so if a Navi, according to the Rambam, if a Navi comes and says, don't follow the Torah permanently, this mitzvah no longer applies. So we know he's a Navi Sheker. We know he's false. According to the Ramban, if a Navi would come and say 100%, if a Navi would come and say, I'm a Navi, according to the Rambam, if a Navi will come and contradict Yirmiyahu, then that doesn't prove he's false. Doesn't prove anything. If a Navi, according to the Ramban, if a Navi comes and disputes Yirmiyahu, or if a Navi comes and disputes Moshe Rabbeinu, it's the same thing. It causes a problem. So we would normally accept 100% that he's a Navi, but now that he contradicts one of the Nevi'im, what do? We have to accept him anyway. It's only if he so that's why Ramban has to go to Ma'amad Har Sinai. Only because we had direct from Hashem.
Primary source.
It's a primary source. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yirmiyahu, this new Navi, it's all indirect from Hashem. So the Ramban is saying we can't choose. We can't make it. We don't have any mechanism for deciding who's who. It's only when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so lo tehei shmiya gedola miriyah, we saw Har Sinai, and therefore if anyone contradicts Har Sinai, which we got directly, so his indirect, that proves that he's not a true Navi and he's a Navi Sheker. Otherwise, we can't say that he's a Navi Sheker because this Navi, they're all the same to us. But what about all this? So that when the Rambam says Moshe Rabbeinu is a unique Navi, he has a pasuk, Lokam b'Yisrael od Navi k'Moshe, right? And pe al daber bo. So what does the Ramban do with that? The Ramban certainly agrees with that. He's not going to contradict it. He quotes it. But that's talking about the form, the nature. How does he get it? So Ramban would say, yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu got his Nevuah while being awake. But how does that mean he's right and this other guy's wrong? They're all Nevi'im. They all proved it. We're all 100%. It's only because he goes to Har Sinai, something that we saw directly, that Lo Teshmiya Gedola Miriyah. We saw Har Sinai, and therefore anyone comes to contradict it, we can't believe him. So that, I think, is why the Ramban goes straight to Har Sinai, and the Rambam was a different pshat on Nevi'im, so that's why he doesn't go to Har Sinai, he goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, who we know for 100%, and he stops there. Okay, so now we'll take the food, and we'll continue with the next subject.
There's a shot that we heard from Hashem the entire quote of Har Sinai.
Okay, so we're dining, and we'll continue to the same halacha we were just doing, just the beginning of it, halacha zayin. So we kind of glossed over it before. First, let's take a step back. Okay, so we saw the past few weeks, the Rambam requires a certain amount of preparation to reach Nevuah. Intellectual, spiritual preparation, you have to, not allowed to waste any time, you always have to be thinking of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you have to really reach that top that a human being can possibly reach, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take you that extra step to the highest transformative religious experience. You need to be prepared for Nevuah, and you need to really be at the top of your game. The Abarbanel disagrees. He says no preparation is necessarily required. It's expected. The Gemara says you have to have a certain amount of preparation. Chacham, Gibo, Arshir, V'anav. Fine. But not everyone who gets... It's really a miracle. That first view that the Rambam said was pagan, so the Abarbanel accepts. He says Nevuah is totally miracle. Hashem could give Nevuah to anybody, and he has a proof. He has a proof from Amos. Because Amos says of himself, I'm not a Navi, I'm not a Ben Navi, I'm just a shepherd. So the fact that he's a shepherd doesn't prove anything, right? Because who else was a shepherd? Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, Yaakov was a shepherd. Being a shepherd is a very contemplative profession, or it could be. You could just space out all day. But you're sitting there and you're basically trying to make sure that the sheep don't leave. So you just kind of sit there and you can think, and you can contemplate, and you can reach high levels. Or you could be, drinking beer the whole time, and then you don't have to be a philosopher, but you could be. That's not a raya. But the raya is, he says, I'm not a Navi, I'm not a Ben Navi. And a Ben Navi, we've learned, Bnei Nevi'im were the Talmidim. They were the people who were trying to become Nevi'im. They were the students. So he said, I'm not a Navi, I didn't reach that level. I didn't even study, I didn't take the qualifying exams. I'm a nobody, I'm just a shepherd. And, not even the best of shepherds. So if I were to answer the Abarbanel, I would say very simply, that's not a proof that he's not qualified to be a Navi. Adirabba, it's a proof that he is. Because he's an Anav. He's modest. He's saying, and in fact, in one of the Rambam's own tshuvas, his letters, he starts off saying, I'm not a Navi. I think we discussed this last week or 2 weeks ago. But
And another thing is,
meaning is he lying? Is he lying? So he's just being humble. He's being humble. So that's what I would say. But that's, I think, not lumdish enough. So the Malbim, in the beginning of his commentary to Amos and the beginning of his commentary to Yirmiyahu, offers an explanation. And this goes to something Rabbi Shifman asked last week after we turned off the recording. Yirmiyahu, we said you have to be happy. Have to be happy. That's why they'd have people playing the music for the Bnei Nevi'im so they could prophesy. Yirmiyahu was a miserable person. He lived in misery. He was chased. He was talking about all the destruction, all the bad things. And
He wasn't miserable. He lived in a bad condition.
he was happy with his misery.
Yes,
He was literally chased and hounded in his lifetime.
head up to, waist deep in mud, but that doesn't mean he's miserable.
The Malbim seems to think that he was miserable. So he asks, how could he be a Navi if he was miserable? So he gives an answer, and I'm going to expand it a little bit. It all goes back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, after many years working for Lavan as a shepherd, he had a family, many children, many wives, a lot of money, and he's coming out, entering Eretz Yisrael, and who comes there? Asa with 400 men. And he's terrified. That's the brother who he stole the birthright from, and now he's coming with all the money and the family and all the wonderful things, and he's scared of Esau. Vayira Yaakov. So how could he be scared? The Gemara asks this question. How could he be scared? So the answer is Shema Yigram Achet. He's worried maybe he did some sort of an avera. So the Rambam, in his introduction to Perush Mishnayos, he asked the Kasha, what do you mean? Yaakov Avinu had a haftacha, he had a promise from Hashem that Anochi Ayeh Itach Ushmarcha Bechol Asher Talech. I'm not quoting it accurately. You should never quote the psukim by heart because I always get it wrong. So Ushmarticha Bechol Asher Talech. Hashem promised him, I will protect you wherever you go. So ask the Rambam, so why? What was Rambam? It's not, he opened up a Chumash and he saw a promise. Hashem told him directly, I will protect you. Was he scared of Esau? So the Ramban, in his Sefer Emunu B'Tachon, or they think it's the Ramban, or maybe one of his Talmidim wrote it, he says, Enachinami, that was wrong. He didn't have B'Tachon. What? But who cares, Shema Yigram Achet? Hashem promised him. And points out the Rambam, the Gemara in Brachos of Daf Daled says, any Nevuah for bad doesn't have to come true because we could do tshuva. And if we do tshuva, Hashem doesn't punish us. That's the way Hashem created the world. But if it's a nevuah for good, have always come true even if we do averis. Because once Hashem says something for good, so the Gemara doesn't explain why. The Rambam says why, which ties into something we were just talking about. The Rambam says how are we supposed to test a navi? If any bad nevuah doesn't have to come true, if we do tshuva, and any good nevuah doesn't have to come true if we do nevera. So what are we left with to test a navi? No navi, anything he says doesn't have to come true because their external circumstances could change. So the Rambam says that's why Hashem left it that any good nevuah will come true automatically, so we could test someone if he's a navi. Doesn't have to do a card trick. Doesn't have to turn a staff into a serpent. If he tells you something good that will happen, that is specific and unique within the test environment, and it will come true, and it comes true, then we assume he's a Navi, because that's the way Hashem made the world. So again, Yaakov Avinu got a promise from Hashem of a good thing, I'll protect you, and he's worried, Shema Yigram Achet, that's the Rambam, it doesn't matter if he sins. Once Hashem says something good is going to happen, it will happen no matter what. So the Rambam, it gives us an answer.
What about David when he was running from Shaul? Shmuel told him that you're going to be king. Why was David scared?
Meaning, well, he said, fine, so he knows he's going to live and be king. He doesn't know if he's going to have all his limbs, or, you know.
Same thing with Yaakov. You could say that maybe, he also could have killed it, and also at the same time, it could have been killed in the war.
So that some people give the answer of, Yaakov will emerge unscathed, but he's got children that he has to worry about, and he's got, wives, and so you're right. That's some Mefarshim give that answer, that he was worried about his kids.
Can I give a slightly different answer to the question?
Sure, go ahead.
You can have competing good and bad nevuahs. In other words, if something could be simultaneously good for one person and bad for another person. So the good for the person of you is double enough, don't worry. But on the other hand, the bad was to show him that you're not going to be king anymore. But in theory, that could always be reversed. The show can always get out of hot water, maybe with sugar to some degree. So there could be competing situations. In other words, maybe Shaul would do tshuva, or maybe something would turn around for him, and maybe he'd end up in jail.
So I'm gonna have to disagree with you. This from a Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav talks about Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu, I think it's in Devarim, Parshas Devarim. I don't remember the exact language. He's talking about going to Eretz Yisrael, and Hashem says, "No, you're not going to Eretz Yisrael." Oh no, it's Vaschanan. I'm sorry. No, you will not go into Eretz Yisrael. And then he starts talking about Yehoshua. So the Brisker Rav says, "What's the connection?" Because Moshe Rabbeinu was saying it was a nevuah for a bad thing, and so I'll do tshuva. Maybe I did enough tshuva and enough ma'asim tovim that you can reverse it. And so Hashem says, no, because your dying in the midbar is good for Yehoshua. So it's actually a nevuah with even a little bit of good for someone else, and therefore Hashem can't undo it. That's the Brisker Rav's sheet does that. It's good and bad.
Moshe Rabbeinu could have done it, just not a video.
I don't know. So it's a kasha on the Brisker Rav. I hear. But his general point is that if it's good for someone and bad for someone else, that counts as good, and therefore it has to come true.
So that makes sense, but Moshe could still have done it, just not as leader.
Maybe it's not possible. Mali Makodesh and Marine? No, that's not true. I don't know. That's a good point. So the Rambam gives his answer. He says a difference, like what we saw in Halacha Zayin, there's a difference between a nevuah to an individual and a nevuah to the public. Because what does he say in Halacha Zayin? Hanavi efsher shetia nevuah so la'atzmo bilvad. It could be nevuah, it's just for yourself. You're a tzaddik nister, you're hidden in the forest, you're doing all these great things, you reach the highest level, and therefore Hashem gives it to you as a transformative religious experience. It's the best, it's the top of the top. You deserve a nevuah. Don't tell anybody else, it's just you. Or, after, it's possible that you'll be sent out to spread the nevuah. And the way the Rambam says in more Nevuchim is a little beautiful. Because the language he uses for nevuah is overflow, right? We're talking about the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain, and it overflows from the right side to the left side. Overflow. And the Rambam says it could be it overflows so much, it overflows beyond you, and you have to teach. And he talks about if it's just in the right side of the brain, right, the intellect, so you could be a great scientist. So some people are great scientists, and they come up with discoveries. And some people are great scientists, and they teach, and they write books, and that's the overflow part. And similar to a Navi, someone could be a great Navi, and it just overflows into himself, and he reaches the highest levels. But someone could overflow so much that he has to spread it to other people. So what, says the Rambam, what was the promise to Yaakov Avinu? It was a nevuah to himself. He didn't tell anybody. Eventually got written in the Torah, so we know about it. But otherwise, it would have been a secret. So let's go back. Why does a nevuah that is good have to come true? Because otherwise, how are we supposed to test a navi? So says the Rambam, so that only applies to a nevuah that you tell other people. So he says, only a nevuah that you tell other people, if it's good, it has to come true. A private nevuah, like the one to Yaakov Avinu, doesn't have to come true, because no one can test it anyway. So the whole svara doesn't apply. So therefore, that's why Yaakov was worried, Shema Yigram Achet, because it was a private nevuah, and a private nevuah for good doesn't have to come true. So if he had done an avera, then he wouldn't have been worthy. But I don't know. Bris Bein Besarim. Yeah, it's a good question.
Nobody else seemed to be there.
I'm sorry?
Nobody else seemed to be there.
Nobody else was there, right? So maybe that's chat. The Gemara says Bris Avos is done. There's no more Bris Avos left for us. Maybe that's explanation. Yeah. So Tosfos asked the kasha. What do you mean? We say in Shemon Esrei. Zocher Chazdei Avos. So why? So yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Actually, a very, very good question, David. I don't know the answer to that. So the Malbim uses that to answer the questions we started. Our Barbanel's questions on the Rambam. Barbanel said, how could Amos be a Navi? According to the Rambam, how could Amos be a Navi? He wasn't prepared. How could Yirmiyahu be a Navi? He was a miserable human being. He was very sad and chaste, and he was near death. They tried to kill him. So it says the Malbim, when do you need all these preparations that the Rambam was talking about? When it's a nevuah for yourself. When you want to reach the highest level of religious experience, so then you have to check all the boxes and be the highest level of preparation. But if Hashem needs a Navi to send a message, Hashem could pick whoever he wants. He'll pick the most qualified person available, given all the circumstances. And in that case, it could be someone miserable like Yirmiyahu, or it could be someone who was not a Navi and not a Ben Navi like Amos. Hashem will pick whoever is right, even if he's not fully prepared. That's how the Malbim answers the Abarbanel's questions. And we saw something similar. The Kesef Mishnah, the only Kesef Mishnah in Perek Zion, he quotes a rush. If you remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. The Gemara says there's no nevuah except for someone with Chacham, Asher, and Gibor. Some have the gears of Anav. The Rambam doesn't seem to say Asher. So why not? So the Kesef Mishnah quotes the Rush, who says, he adds one word in his commentary to that Gemara. Ein hashchina shara b'kvius. If you want to be a long-time permanent Navi, you want to, for a one-time event, anyone can become a Navi for a one-time event. Hashem picks who he needs. But if you want to be a Navi for decades, so for that, you got to be prepared. You got to be qualified. So the Rush is not saying exactly like the Malbim, but it's similar to the Malbim, that the only person who definitely needs a preparation is someone who's going to be a Navi for himself. But if it's a Navi for other people, you don't. Now, did the Rambam intend that? I find it very hard to believe that the Rambam intended that. He explains why you need the preparation. You need your intellect and then this side and then that side, the left side and the right side to be right. And he nowhere in this entire parak does he talk about. He talks about a Navi for yourself and a Navi for other people, and he doesn't explain that goes back on Halacha Aleph, all the preparations. So we go back to the Kashas of the Barbanel, and we gave the Malbim's explanation. So to answer the Kasha on Amos, we said maybe we have an answer, that Amos was just being humble, and really he was prepared. What about Yirmiyahu? So then we have Shlomo's answer, that he overcame and Harry's answer, that Yirmiyahu overcame his circumstances, and he was able to meditate and reach serenity and be calm and happy and get Nevuah that way.
You do see that he used to complain at the beginning.
He complained, yes.
And then he stopped complaining.
How do you explain Shaul?
He embraced it.
How do you explain Shaul? That...
He wasn't prepared.
No, he was prepared.
Prepared. So chasing dogs.
Early in his life, he prepared. Shmuel says, go with the Bnei Nevi'im.
Go meet them, and Nevuah will be sure on you. And then what they respond is Shaul part of the Bnei Nevi'im, meaning that he wasn't.
Right, but he was, at that point in his life, he was a little sadical, right? He was Anav, he hid.
He wasn't Bnei Nevi'im.
No, but, so he didn't need a Rebbe. I mean,
Wait a minute, but the counterweight is, nobody seems to mention that he was affected by madness also. I mean, that could have...
Later in his life.
Yeah, but...
He didn't get Nevuah later in his life. He needed Shmuel to come to him and tell him off. Because at that point, you're right, he had deteriorated. So, in Mitzvah Hashem, next week, which will be the end of the series this summer, we went over time, sorry. We'll just sum up and we'll conclude and have a good dinner together also as well. Thank you and have a good week.